I'm going to talk about visualization. In general, visualization, even though you will see there is a history in their work in community, I really complain that the MICAI community is not in favor of visualization. They don't do enough visualization. We have very few visualization papers. And it's a pity because everything we do at the end up with visualization. So we really need to connect to SIGGRAPH community and do more work with them in case of visualization. So I don't spend a lot of time justifying augmented reality in MIC and CAI because I think all of you have heard 10 times about it, and you know that we have too much information inside the operating room. They don't have a mouse, they can't visualize 3D, they can't manipulate, they are under pressure of workflow, as we discussed in the morning. So fusion of data and augmented reality is definitely a must. Currently, inside operating rooms, in average, you find between 6 and sometimes 12 displays. The angiographic systems these days come systematically with 8 displays. And very often, each provider of a system has its own display. And this is very, making everything very complex. Also, the training of surgeons becomes complex because the main surgeon knows to fetch which information on which displays, and he's doing it implicitly, he or she. But it's very hard to pass this information. So the idea would be to reduce the display, avoiding mental registration and therefore making some mistakes, and then providing right information at the right time to reduce interaction, which is almost impossible inside operating. This is just one example of vertebraloplasty when you see how the surgeons are looking away from the patient, looking at the complex data on the monitor. This is CT. And they are discussing it before going to the patient, even though this is an experiment. But this is how the setup is inside vertebroplasty, for example, under CT. And of course, the idea would be to bring that, include that into different kinds of display. We discussed some of them, but probably HMD, head-mounted display, would, for any augmented reality person, is the kind of dream. And we chat about it a little bit. So just for sake of definition, Paul Milgrams had defined this continuity, reality, virtuality continuum. And he had put the reality on one side, the virtual reality on the other side, and then talked about augmented virtuality, where you take the virtual and augmented with real, or augmented reality where you bring the virtual into the real world. And just to define the limit of what I would call augmented reality, this work of Reitinger at Graz, where I was also one of the reviewer of this thesis, was a beautiful thesis. I do not call this augmented reality. This is beautiful user interface. This is a nice virtual, real user interface. This is, I don't call it augmented reality because it's not superimposed onto the reality. This is an advanced user interface allowing surgeons or allowing radiologists to label different parts of the liver, do a planning of surgery. But I just wanted to tell you, this is for me a limit, a nice barrier. This has to go on the patient for me to call it augmented reality. Now, there are different ways of doing augmented reality. Projection is one of the ways of doing augmented reality. In non-medical, this has been very successful. In medical, for the moment, it's mostly limited to laser projection of a point or a trajectory. It has advantages and disadvantages. The major disadvantage in medical is you have to do a reconstruction of surface, and in particular, you have to manipulate the lighting of the operating room. And this is something, lighting inside the operating room is something very sensitive. And they don't like you to dim the light because your projection is not nicely done. And then you have to do real-time surface reconstruction because your projection has to be adapted to the scene. There is technology out there, like the one of Oliver Bimber and etc., where they can take any surface and by computing the normal to the surface and the projection, make you see a flat movie on an completely non-planar shape. But inside the operating room, this would be dynamic and would be very hard to do. The second possibility is projecting the virtual onto your retina. US Army had sponsored microvision for many years in the 90s to do for their soldiers. This is laser projection on the retina. Microvision was the company in Seattle who was doing it. In Siemens Corporate Research, I worked on this system for about 2 years for automation to put information. And the first comment I get from Mr. Friedrich, head of automation in research in Nuremberg, was that he doesn't want to have the Microsoft logo burned on his retina. So he was very sensitive about the projection of laser to the retina. There were some research on the fact that the energy was very low, but some people also were claiming that if I can see it, then the energy is there. So, but this was used by US Army for a while, and this has the best contrast when we go to optical see-through. Now, the other one is seeing the world through semi-transparent displays. Now, this is very hot because of the Google glasses. For some of you, I was telling you about the Google Glass history. Was developed originally to my knowledge, when I was seeing him as a master's student by Tad Starner in MIT Media Lab back in 93, 94. He created the first version. The history was he was working for a company where they had a camera hanging from on the neck, and they wanted to read the gesture for deaf people and translate it into voice. And for that, he had at that time to create a computer, attach it, do it wearable, and then connect it to internet. And then he found out that it's better to have the camera on display here. So if you go on the search for the internet, you will find his first version back in 93, 94. Then he created the micro-optical company. There was a bunch of research on that by Harvard Medical School on ophthalmology. There were people in industry and other places that started to look into it, but it was only 2 years ago where Google asked Tad Starner to go to them and create the Google glasses, or branded as Google glasses, where it became very popular. Now you see on very many websites, including Stanford, where surgeons start to use it for accessing information. So this is an example of optical see-through. We talk about other kinds of optical see-through too, and I will in particular talk about differences, because now with the Google glasses, many surgeons and physicians may come to you and try to ask you to do magic or things with this thing. So it's good to know the differences between optical and video see-through. So the last one is video see-through, whether it's a monitor on which you do the video see-through, or whether it's a camera attached, or whether it's a head-mounted display. We call it video see-through, where you see the world through the video. So to make the differences, I will try to, in particular, explain the major differences between optical and video see-through. So in optical see-through, you have a display, you have the virtual object here. Usually you have a prism or a semi-transparent mirror, where you can see the real object and the virtual object at the same time. In video see-through, you are seeing the world through videos, one or two. And they come. So what some of the differences is the image quality. Of course, in video see-through, you are at the limit of your camera and display. This is what is your maximum resolution you can get. In optical see-through, only in the part you are augmenting, you are at the display resolution. The rest is the resolution of your eye, which we cannot match with any hardware still. So this is one problem. In some cases, people say, I definitely want to see the real world as they are with that resolution. For example, we had some tests at Siemens Automation at that time. They couldn't read the little things when it was with optical video see-through, but with optical see-through, they could. The disadvantage of optical see-through is that you cannot control the brightness of the board. Therefore, you have to control the brightness of your display. So you're dimming the board more or less. You see the board not in its real intensity in order to be able to see the augmentation. So you can only control the augmentation, not the visibility, and therefore, usually you are tarnishing the view of the board. In video see-through, you can control everything. So you can also have a better fusion of data in video see-through because you can, by computer vision, you can know which pixel is behind it and do everything. In optical see-through, you can't do it unless your camera is co-aligned with your retinal image or your eye, which is not easy to calibrate. We'll talk about it. So in hardware sense, if your hardware failure, then with video see-through, you are blind. With optical see-through, you still have the view, you just don't have the augmentation. But with video see-through, you are actually blind. Now, one major issue in addition to calibration that I talk in a second, eye-to-display transformation changes always happens with optical see-through. Even if I super calibrate my optical see-through, if now I move it a little bit in front of my eyes, my calibration is gone. And with video see-through, once you calibrate your cameras, your videos, then you have the registration. You can move it up, down, even take it off your head, you still have the same calibration, you have no problem. This is a major issue in engineering. So that's what I wanted to do on the blackboard, but I tell you, so to my knowledge, the standard way of calibrating an optical see-through is still the method we developed together with Mihran Tousserian back in 2000. And that method was, we called it a single point active alignment method. So the idea was, or SPAM. So the idea was that you had the display, and why is the complexity of calibration? Because I'm not calibrating a camera, I'm calibrating your retina. And if I take a rich optical see-through from my head to your head, it will not be calibrated. It has to be calibrated for the person and for the exact position of the head mounted on your head. So what we were doing, we were fixing very nicely the head-mounted display. Then for calibration, because the calibration in that case has to be active. You can't put a calibration grid because you don't know what the eye is seeing at that moment. So the calibration of a SPAM, the way it works, if you all see that, I will put it there, but the way it works is that I have a display, I visualize a point on that display, and you are supposed to actively align that point with a point in your board. And this alignment gives us a 3D to 2D point correspondences. And the user was supposed to move around. While this point on the display was moving, the user was also supposed to move in this space and make alignments and click a button. I'm aligned, I'm aligned, I'm aligned, I'm aligned, I'm aligned. You could either move your head, or you could take with a fixed object in the board, or you could take a tracked object and move it and align the object with the points on your display. And if you had theoretically 11 points, practically you needed at least 16, and you had to cover your working area to have a reasonable precision. Then you would get this 3D, 2D registration. You would calibrate your projection matrix of your retina. And at that point, if you would not touch the display, you and your tracking would be well, then you had a calibrated optical see-through. Now, as soon as you touch the display, you give it to someone, it's gone. So there were some methods we tried to improve it. For example, there is a method, again, we published in 2001, where you do a projection matrix estimation, and then you suppose that as you move it, you're only changing a few parameters of shear and scale or rotation, and then you only adjust for a few parameters, not for the whole 11 parameters of, or 15 parameters of your projection matrix based on whether you take it as affine or perspective. So you could do a partial estimation and improve it, or if I was going from someone to someone else, then we would change it. Then we created some possibility to make it easier, like you would put it on your head, and while you were checking your emails, we were using those as the calibration tanks for your spam. But it's very complex. On the other side, the video see-through calibration is computer vision calibration, is a standard, is precise, and it can be done all the time. Now, one thing which is also I have to tell is if you have a video see-through, you can cheat, which means that you can show the virtual, you can delay the reality by a few milliseconds and have no lag. Because the lag, the jitter between the real world and the virtual world gives you a headache, kills you. So with an optical see-through, you have no way of going around it because you see the real world. So your virtual should be totally synchronized. Otherwise, you have a jitter, and that makes you really disturbs you if it's augmentation. With a video, if you have a few millisecond delay, you just make the word delayed by a few seconds. You don't perceive it. You only perceive it if your action is faster than your delay. This was nicely shown by Frank Sauer, Ali Kamen, and etc. I get to that. And it's functioning. It's functioning beautifully. So the advantage and disadvantage is quality degrees of image in video see-through, perfect real image in optical see-through. Virtual images must be brighter than real image, full control of merging images, real image perceived. You can delay the other one for the lag. A major engineering issue, you only need to calibrate your camera. For video see-through, eye to display transformation is very complicated, and you have to do it actively. And again, system failure. Now, if you ask me which one would be prevailing in the future, I would tell them, and we will see different augmented reality solutions, there would be none. All of them would work. It depends on your application. Even within an application, it depends where in the workflow you are. For some applications, you want to check the patient data, optical see-through, even Google glasses. You want to see the augmentation of an ultrasound and CT, forget about optical see-through. So you may have multiple augmented displays inside one operating room, and there would be no winner. Why should it be a winner? There is no one solution for everything. So I think we have to keep eye on all these technologies, learn how each of them work, and based on our application, choose the right display, or even based on phase of our applications. So I go very quickly over some state of art until 2010, and this is based on the paper of Tobias Zielhorst, whose head was used for comparing the optical see-through with video see-through. You can read that for more details. So to my knowledge, the first medical augmented reality proposal was done by Henry Fuchs back in 92-93, where he suggested that we take a head-mounted display and we visualize, the ultrasound on the patient or the endoscopy on the patient together with Andrea State. And at that time, I would say the major issue was computational power. We are talking about 92-93, and the power of computation was miserable at that time. So what they did was not really impressive, even though their ideas were the base of many work after them. Then probably the work of Eddie Edwards and Dave Hawkes and the whole team in Guy's Hospital at that time, King's College at that time, was, and Guy's Hospital, both together, was one of the very interesting things, because in this case, we are talking about an optical see-through, but it's a very particular optical see-through. It's a microscope, which means you always look through a hole, and you always look through a fixed optic of a magnifier. As soon as you do that, then all your calibration of eye to display goes away. The calibration is within your microscope, and since you have to work into a hole, if you calibrate your optic of microscope with your virtual display, then it's done. So many things that I told about optical see-through does not work if it's a microscopic or magnifier. So they did a beautiful work. They took here, what you see here, they took the preoperative CTA segmented data and bring it actually to real surgery. And the problem was what Tim Salkudian was mentioning. They had the problem of perception. The surgeons would see this as floating. You also see it as floating and not at the right place, even though the calibration was perfect. It is virtually at the right place, but your brain says, I can't see through. This is something floating in space. So you misplace it because your perception says, this is not good. This is not the right thing. So the doctors found it disturbing. Even though they were very excited about it, it didn't continue. Then, which brings the problem of workflow integration at the same time. Then Ron Kikines, Grimson, and others in '96 in Harvard Medical School and MIT, they took preoperative data, they segmented it, and then they did some calibration with tracking, and they visualized it on a monitor, external monitor, on the head of the patient. Again, their major problem was depth perception and workflow integration, so it was done for some publication, didn't continue. Then Di Gioio and at CMU with Canada and others, they used this AR window back in '98. They had a semi-transparent window between the doctor and the patient, and they would take the CT in case this was mostly application of hip and orthopedic. They would visualize that as a semi-transparent display. Later, Germans really liked it, and Medarpa was a company out of Fraunhofer in Darmstadt. They really built the whole system. Then ARCIS was another system done in Cesar Institute in Bonn, which was actually, some of them were used for a few surgeries. The problem with this technology, most of all, is tracking, because you have a lot of compound. You have the head of the surgeon, you have the patient, you have the display, and all of this has to be tracked. You also have the tools. And if the tools are like maxillofacial, short tools, then you can do it better. If you have endoscopy or laparoscopy, laparoscopic, forget about it. If you have a drill, also you can forget about it. But the problem, when in Munich, Dr. Zeilhofer, who is now in Basel, he did some patients in maxillofacial. The problem was the recalibration was taking about 20 minutes. If you would touch something, you had a lot of tracking and calibration problem. So the integration into the workflow was very hard. Then Frank Sauer and his team with Ali Kame and Sebastian Vogt, back in 2000, they took the ideas of Henry Fuchs, and they took beautiful technologies and computational power of the 2000, and then they were the first ones, from my point of view, to provide a video see-through solution, which was really acceptable, which was exciting, which was real-time, and could show augmentation with video see-through, which was very exceptional. However, they had still the problem of depth perception and workflow integration. These were two problems that were bugging them. I just continue. The part we did, I explained it later. So they were also a series of work, including mine, 3 works. The one is mine, I will explain it later. But in 1999 and 2000, there were 3 works on 3 different modalities. Now, the idea here is that inside operating room, the real eye of the doctor is the imaging eye. When he looks to do orthopedic surgery, his real eye is the X-ray. When he's doing an ultrasound guidance, his real eye is guidance. And if he's doing a CT guidance, his real eye is the CT. Can we directly augment the view with those? Can we directly augment the view of those modalities? And there were 3 solutions. All the 3 solutions used the mirrors. The one of us with X-ray I explained later. The one of George Stetten, I modified these slides the last time because we were in a meeting where George and Gabor were there. So I was asking them to tell me what their default was, why were not used. So we have let us ask Gabor and things I forgot. So the problem with the system of Stetten, which is a beautiful system, it has a display on the ultrasound and a semi-transparent mirror where actually you can see the ultrasound on your hand, as you see here. So his major problem, it's really cool, but the major problem is integration and the fact that when you see it on a surface, if the surface is not a regular surface, then if it's directly the surface of patient, it's fine. If it's the surface of tissues and modified surface, the image doesn't look good. It doesn't pass. It's not really usable. So I would say for education, it's perfect. Masamune and Gabor Fichtinger, they also use the mirror in the CT to superimpose the slice of CT on the patient. The problem, from my point of view, is working under CT inside operating room is not reasonable, because this is a device for preoperative data. So it was huge, it was complex to fit it into the workflow. And Stefan Nicola and Luc Soler and others are IRCAD. They also use external cameras and displays to superimpose data. And now, actually, in IRCAD, they are doing it, but this is not done automatically. They are rich enough to have a control room in which an engineer is sitting and manually superimposes the data, but then they can see it during operation. So they have a kind of cockpit where they do the augmentation. Now, back in those times, 2003, 2004, we took the ramp system in Munich and we started to play with visualization. So this was in a conference of surgery. This is Jörg Traub's feet. He had a ski accident, and therefore he had a CT of his feet. And now you see his CT on top of his feet. We started to play with visualization. So the first one was just volume rendering. This is positioning with a wireless mouse, the X-ray on his feet. And if he would move his feet rigidly, then it would be fine. And then we started to combine volume rendering and display of slices. And the surgeons became super excited. They thought they can do everything. So we started to do a set of cadaver studies. And I always call it the best failure we ever had. So it was really cool. It was really great. We took a bunch of cadavers and a few surgeons, and they used their bare eye and X-ray. They used the Camera-Augmented Mobile C-arm that I'm showing in a second, and they used this display. And they were all excited about this, but they succeeded with the classical method and Camera-Augmented Mobile C-arm. They also completely succeeded. And with this, majority of them failed. And now, why do I call it the best failure? Because they were frustrated. They were all sure that this will work. So we had the best discussion with the set of surgeons, and they tried to brainstorm and help us why they failed. And the answer at that point, 99% was perception. They would not see it at the right place. Even though it was really cool for diagnostic or for training, for drilling into it, this was misleading them because of the depth perception issue. So we started to think with them how we can improve that. And I show you one of the solutions. I explain how this solution works. So this is, again, the feet of Jörg, but you see that you see it floating. You don't see it inside, even though the calibration is perfect. So we started to go to SIGGRAPH community and learn from them what they did in virtual, and then model our augmented reality problem with their advanced technology. And this is what we came up, and now the surgeons were much more interested because actually the depth perception was much, much better. You can really feel that you are seeing inside. Now, there are a bunch of phenomena that are cutting together to give you this impression, and I talk to you about them, how they happen. This is, first we take the bad cases. This is a cadaver study, and this was these are the two studies that I show you. One is with cadaver, and one is with one candidate who also had a CT of her head. Her real name is not Susie, but we called her Susie on the website. So these are the two datas. Now, if I do just augmentation, you see that it's useless. If I just do the augmentation of virtual on the real, everything would be floating and would not be really useful. So if you do it correctly, okay, no, this is the same display. Sorry about that. Oh, sorry. As soon as the system knows I have 15 minutes, okay, we tried different things. One of the things which was useful but not solving everything was a window. As soon as you have a window, this was an idea already proposed in the 90s by Henry Fuchs and by Majura. Because as soon as you have a window, you see parallax. If you move your head, you see more and less, and that gives you the impression that you're seeing through the object. But the bad thing is that you get rid of the surface, and that would remove a lot of impression that you could have from the surface. We tried to have the surface as a glass surface. It didn't help much. Now, we digged into the SIGGRAPH community. Those guys who do virtual, only virtual, not augmented reality, they don't have videos, they have virtual, they do beautiful visualizations. They do incredible math, and they do nice computation. So several things that took our, was attractive for us was focus of context, but also ghosting. And this, we took them together. So the way they were showing inside the cars, inside the tools, a lot of beautiful ideas in SIGGRAPH with the huge, nice mathematics behind them. We had to model now augmented reality and understand that we have video instead of virtual, and then model it. So basically what we did is now at each pixel on the face of Susie, we are computing 3 different things. 2 of them are observer dependent. One is where I am looking with my HMD. What is my focus? So as I go, this display unfortunately is not the contrast is not very good on my computer, you see better. So when you go from center of attention to outside, you have an increase in opacity. So it acts as a whole, but with a very smooth increase of opacity. Then you look at the angle of view between your direction and the normal to the surface of the object coming from CT. So each time, the concept is that if I look in front of a flat surface, I see through it. But if I start to rotate it, I see less and less. I can see less and less through it. So based on the angle of the view, we defined a value for that pixel. The same thing, now this time from CT, we compute the curvature, the Gaussian curvature on the surface, and we say the higher curvature, the more information. So if I don't want to miss a high curvature on the face, so the opacity increases. So we defined a function of opacity, which is a combination of these 3 values for each pixel, and suddenly you feel that you see through the object. I hope you feel that you see through Susie. And in this case, you actually see the ghost, and that allows you to feel that you're seeing inside. Same thing with the cadaver. When it cuts, it's because our CT was stopping there. So now you see the CT inside, and you feel that, this is the more perceptual view. This is again the cadaver. And now I wanted to show that now in this case you can also add some other tricks in visualization which has been already used also in SIGGRAPH, and in this case is the shadow. So you can say take the shadow of a real tool and visualize it with a virtual object. Let me, sorry again. Okay, now we didn't want to bring a drill next to Susie's face, so you see the shadow of the tool. But in this case, you see the shadow of the real endoscope on a virtual CT inside the patient. So that it starts to give you, and actually the camera acts as a projector. So you start to feel that the camera, the CT, and the patient are all in one space. So we start to use the cues that the human perception uses to improve the visualization. Now, one major problem that in AR we had, critical problem, is you show the augmentation. As soon as you show the augmentation, you lose the 3D. Because if I show you a 3D, like a CT rendering, the reason you see it 3D is because you rotate it. You see it from all points of view. Or you rotate around a visualization and you see all the views. So how can I do that? If I have an augmentation, I lose the 3D. Either the surgeon has to go under the bed to see a view from bottom, or I have to rotate a patient under surgery to see the other side. So the idea was to use the same concept because the same problem is posed to your dentist. He can't get into your mouth, but he wants to have impossible views inside your mouth, so he uses a mirror. So we use the same concept and defined a virtual tangible mirror that we insert into the virtual world with a wireless mouse, and now we can get any view while the augmentation is valid. So we can observe the 3D, we can analyze it, we can also leave the mirror there. Now there is this paper that some of you read. This has many advantages. One of them is, what is the comparison of this by having multiple projections? Multiple projections are not perceptually acceptable because they are fixed from points of view which are not yours. But as soon as you use a mirror, your interaction is connecting you to the world. And that gives you a much higher perception. This is the best projection because it connects to your habit and your world. On the other hand, when you move wirelessly the mirror, you're using the proprioception, which tells you the muscles gives you an information of motion into the space that you combine it with your mirror, and then this gives you again increased value of feedback. And the nice thing we showed later is that all the effects that I showed you in the previous can be included here. I tried in the last 5-7 minutes to go very fast. So this was the Camera-Augmented Mobile C-arm that we developed in 1998. I tell you still quickly how this came, and this shows you that good things come at the intersection of communities. I was working at Siemens Corporate Research to calibrate C-arms. We had attached camera to C-arm in Erlangen, calibrating the movement of the C-arm. In the middle of that, I went for a conference to Japan, to mixed reality conference, where we were doing industrial augmented reality. I saw a bunch of HMDs coming from Sony, and all of them have had here a camera and a prism to, like Google glasses, to align the eye of the user and the camera and the display. And on the airplane, flying back to Erlangen, I thought if I replace the eye of the user with X-ray, then I can do exactly the same thing. So we arrived there. This was the first drawing or concept. And actually, Matthias Mitschke, my student, ran to Müller and got these mirrors for €5. We attached it in front of the camera. We calibrated once forever with the camera. And then we had the very first images in which optics and X-rays was always co-registered. No need for registration. This is the same view. Unfortunately, big companies move very slowly. So it took a few years for me to get out of Siemens and go to Munich hospital, and then sponsored by Siemens, we went with the surgeon and we started to use it during surgeries. And we brought it for, I just wanted to also show, so the surgeon is now doing, takes one X-ray, then he fixes the X-ray, and then he can bring his hand in because the X-ray is not functioning anymore. Now he can do the whole thing. Before he had to put a needle, take an X-ray, move it, put another X-ray, rotate it, take another X-ray. Now you're going from 10, 20 X-rays just to one, and then you can do your actions until you move the patient, and then you have to do another X-ray. We use this system to do, for the first time in the world, we were able to do parallax-free stitching, and that got the Mikai Young Investigator Award in 2009. The reason was they were trying to stitch different X-rays. But of course, people coming from computer vision like Roberto, they know that this is only really possible if either your object is flat, where it's not the patient's, hopefully they are not flat, or that your X-ray is rotating around this X-ray source. This is also impossible with our X-ray system. So thanks to this system, what we were doing, we were putting markers on the bed, we were computing the rotational, the translational aspects of the movement, and the bed was compensating. So between the patient and the C-arm, we had a rotation around the X-ray source, and we would be able to do a complete. Then we brought it into the surgery, and 50 surgeries, 42 surgeries were done. We were supposed to do 50, but we ran out of insurance. And they used it in real surgery. I still need 5 minutes. It's okay? Okay. So I don't show everything to you, but we did a lot of different applications. What was beautiful is that 14 surgeons did these surgeries, but only 4 of them had seen the system before entering the operating room. The 10 others had never seen the system. They were introduced by the chef of surgery for a few minutes, and they would be able to do the work. Now, going through the history of augmented reality so quickly, what we can see is that at the beginning, computational power was a block. Then tracking was a block. It's no more. Computation is no more. Tracking is no more. Perceptual visualization, we have advanced a lot there. And workflow integration, different groups started to do that. But what is the problem that it still prevents us to bring it into the surgery is clinical validation. And as soon as you try to do clinical validation, you find that the clinical relevance should be there. Now, how do I get the clinical relevance? And I believe that this is only possible. We should do relevance-based fusion, and perception is not enough, because if I show things together, some of them are positive, some of them are negative. They need to do things, so we have to get the relevance. How do we define relevance? And that's where we come to machine learning. I think we definitely need to do it with machine learning. Now, the idea is that, for example, if I want to combine OCT and IVUS, I have to find out what is they get from OCT, what they are interested in IVUS. And instead of doing a blending at each pixel, I want to compute what I learned and the blending factor that I learned to do that. We did that in the case of Camera-Augmented Mobile C-arm. The doctors told us what they are interested to see in front and what they are interested to see in back. And then we did random forest because it was very hot. And then that would allow us to go from such visualization on the left-hand side to visualization on the right-hand side, where each pixels we decide based on random forest whether we want to have it visible and with which factor, with which blending factor. And then it becomes much more relevant, I would say. There are a few examples of that. But now, if I want to do the same thing with MR, PET, ultrasound, then I would have more complex scenario. And I finish by showing you a very recent work which will be presented in IEEEs and would be published on IEEEs as well by Christian Schulte-Zumberg. So the idea is we want to use everything you learned during this week. Vesselness, different high-level computer vision and medical imaging criteria that we compute to enable advanced visualization of ultrasound in 3D, 4D, and hopefully multi-modal, which is very complex. So the idea, what you see in a second, is that we define high-level predicate. Things like vesselness, skin layer, muscle layer, gradient magnitude, and the idea is that at each voxel, I have a bunch of predicates. And then the doctor will come and brush and says, I'm interested in this area, I'm interested in that area. And we find out which predicates are emphasizing the visualization of those areas automatically, and then we start to have it. The doctor can also go and interactively change the effect of one of them because he wants to see the vessels or he wants to see the surface. And now, the next step of machine learning is to do this with 200 doctors and 200 data, and then find out what are the optimal predicates with machine learning to give us the best fusion of mono or multimodal. So to finish again, I'm going to be late. We started with Monty Python, we should finish with Monty Python. The idea of patient information, about 50 years ago, or 30 years ago even when I was a kid, you could not read the prescription of the doctors. That was the rule. They would write it in a way that you cannot read it, only the pharmacist could read it. Now at least we have the right to read it, but still the doctors give us minimum information. And I think our technology should allow us to get maximum information that we would not need to go and fetch it on Google, that they would tell us. But this is, since they only have 3 minutes or 5 minutes to spend with us, this has to come from advanced displays. So one of the things I finish with is that we are trying to create a system of Magic Mirror with the usage of our augmented reality. Tobias Bloom took all our systems and visualization and took the data from visible Korean human in CT, MR, and others, and also cut it the slices, and allowed us to create this system. With this system, we went to many museums and schools, and from kids to elderly, and also to foreign minister and interior minister of Germany. They all played with the system and had fun. But I think this is a step towards patient information system. We still have a long way to go. I usually would like to finish with this cartoon from Einstein Simplified, which says, it may not be a perfect wheel, but it is a state-of-art wheel. Thank you for your attention.